Welcome to the Ebony Role Players podcast. I'm your host, Edye Evans-Hyde, singer, performer, and founder of Ebony Role Players. As a Black theater company in Grand Rapids, Michigan, Ebony Role Players strives to inspire, educate, and engage the cultures of our community. In this podcast, we take a deeper dive into the topics and issues surrounding the stories that we tell. So let's jump right into some meaningful dialogue and celebrate the diverse communities that we share. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Ebony Role Players podcast. I'm so happy to have you here, and I'm so happy to have two of my amazing guests, Latoya Booker and Dr. Rhae-Ann Booker. I will say that, and then from here on, we'll just call you Rhae-Ann, okay? I think what I'll do is what I always do is start off with a quote that may get us started, and then we'll get into who my lovely ladies are today that are joining us. So this is a quote that I found from Nellie Borrero. I don't know who Nellie is, but I thought this quote was very interesting. Diversity is a fact, but inclusion is a choice we make every day. As leaders, we have to put out the message that we embrace and not just tolerate diversity. And that was Nellie Borrero. And I thought it was a great way for us to start a conversation today about diversity and equity. It is Black History Month starting today. And I think this is a great time to really have these conversations. So Latoya and Rhae-Ann, welcome, both of you to my podcast. And we have a great relationship, both friends and Rhae-Ann, we have a little history because of family. And I've also, with Ebony Role Players, have been involved with you guys, and we can talk about how that works. But Latoya and Rhae-Ann, first, your both names are Booker, and does that mean you are related?
This has come up, Rhae-Ann, right? Several times. I think we ended with no, but I mean, my last name is through marriage, so who knows? I'm newer to the Booker, so.
Right. Yeah. So certainly, to my knowledge, no, biological family connection, but definitely spiritual connection, and my sister in general, and specifically in the DEI field.
That's right. I'm going to call you the Booker sisters in spirit. How about that?
Sounds good.
Yeah. So Latoya, let's start with you. Talk about who you are and get our audience to know the kind of work you do. And you can go into how you got into it. Give us a little bit of background.
Sure. First of all, thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here with Rhae-Ann and you. I think we met in my path as a student affairs professional. So I have been interested in education, attended Grand Valley wanting to be a high school teacher, and have always been passionate about the kind of education field. Followed that to an opportunity to get a master's in higher ed administration, and worked pretty much my entire career in that space. I've been at some faith-based institutions, some liberal arts institutions, some more career-focused institutions, state institutions. So have enjoyed the opportunity to just be in a space of learning and development, and across different demographics, age groups, again, even just cultural institutions and organizational culture. I think we met at one of those faith-based institutions originally, where you were, I think, faculty in the music department way back in the day. And then, yeah, I've since received my second bachelor's in early childhood education. So really just, again, exploring that realm of little ones to big ones and how we do this thing of learning.
Right.
I think it's so critical to this topic of DEI. If there is any space and hope for us to ground individuals with the principles and the values and the competencies to advance what we call diversity, equity, and inclusion principles, I firmly believe it's in education. I've worked outside a little bit of education with folks who are established in their careers or working professionals, done some consulting outside and in kind of my private life with organizations. And what has always drawn me back to education, whether that be higher education or K-12, is understanding just the role and the power that we have as educational institutions, as educators, to shape the lens for DEI of the folks that we are charged to serve. And I find it, for me, really meaningful to do that with folks at the college level right now as they're learning their craft. So to be able to work with faculty and students who are in the College of Health Professions or in the College of Business, and to think through, right, not only what historical legacies related to diversity, equity, and inclusion and even justice are relevant to my field, but what competencies do I need to have as I look to launch into either the next chapter of my career for many of our adult students, or as I'm just entering the workforce, so that, again, I can really, truly be a professional that is practicing through a strong DEI lens. Because I say this to orientation, families at orientation, there's nothing you can study. There's nothing you can practice. We're knowing and being able to relate to folks who are different is not going to be needed and going to be sought after for employers. So you can't escape the differences that are just part of the beauty and the way in which this world has been created. And what an exciting, I think, just opportunity we have as DEI professionals to engage folks in that and leverage that diversity to learn more about each other. I think it has made me, enriched my life just to have relationships and connections and learn more about, but also be able to tangibly impact the inequities that exist in far too many of our communities and far too many spaces within our industries that we just haven't made enough progress on. So I'll leave it there, but education is the heart and soul of what I get excited about. It's who I am, and I'm excited for today's conversation.
Yeah, that is so, I mean, you hit so many points in that. And I think the biggest point was the educational aspect of it. And also how people who are like your college people who are going to be out in the world, the bottom line is it's a diverse environment, and how we handle that is taught in an educational setting, in a DEI source like you are a part of right now. Thank you for that. Rhae-Ann, can you address that as well?
Yes. Well, I am Rhae-Ann Booker, and I have the honor of serving as the Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at University of Michigan Health West. Many, especially those who are natives of West Michigan, probably think of us still as Metro Health. Some may even go back to Osteopathic Hospital. We are now University of Michigan Health West, and I am honored to work there. I am a native of Grand Rapids, proud graduate of Grand Rapids Public Schools, Crescent High School in particular. I know, Edye, you and I are proud polar bears.
Yes, we are.
And it was actually my experience growing up in Grand Rapids and actually going to middle school that I think first planted seeds of interest for me that now fall within diversity, equity, and inclusion. I can very clearly recall when busing was instituted in our predominantly Black neighborhoods. And I recall that instead of going to South Middle School, that I learned, oh, you're going to go to Riverside Middle School and then on to Creston High School. And I recall asking my mother at that time, who was trying to explain to me the why behind why we no longer would walk, a few blocks to school. And at that time, she said, well, our community is working on ensuring everybody has a quality education. And I recall saying in response to that statement, well, if we're being bussed out, who is being bussed in? Because at that time, I just assumed everyone in every neighborhood had access to quality education, and that, some folks wouldn't have to ride a bus for 40 minutes in order to access quality education. So very early on, I began to see some differences in the communities that we lived in, the access to resources that were available to us. I went on and attended Calvin University, Western Michigan University. I have a love of education similar to Latoya, so much so that I worked at Calvin University and Davenport University for many decades, not years, decades. I am new to healthcare, and I have been in healthcare now for 4 years. Prior to working in healthcare, I was known for saying something very similar to what Latoya said. And I was very much focused on education, the education of our communities, our kids, everyone having access to quality education. And I didn't see myself outside of that space. But I tell you, healthcare, I never thought I could feel more passionate about something than education. Now that I work in healthcare, I better understand that our health is at the core of who we are.
Yes.
It's our beginning. If you don't have your health, this idea of going to school or working these jobs or filling these careers that are in demand, that's out of reach. So at the fundamental level, I'm very passionate about ensuring everyone has access to quality care, health care, and that we are providing culturally competent care so that folks aren't avoiding care or delaying care or being stressed out about how they're going to be treated when they enter our healthcare organization. So I'm very excited about today's conversation and so excited to be on this panel with Latoya as we discuss, two fields that I feel passionate about, both education and healthcare.
Well, and that is why I chose you both, because I know, Rhae-Ann, we pretty much met. I don't think we met. I think we met at CC, and I think at that time you were at Calvin.
Yeah.
And I met you with Cedric. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Over things, which is the theater connection, that type of thing. Because I was the admissions rep at CC and at Davenport at one time. And, I think my whole background is very much education. But I also understand the healthcare aspect because I almost connect them. It's like in Rhae-Ann's position in healthcare, the education for minorities, Black people in particular, and their fear of going into a space that they're not sure they're going to be treated correctly is, I know, something that I have experienced in my path, in my past. And getting more educated on what I need to say when I go in, what are the things that I need to represent myself boldly with. And it's all a part of education as well. So yeah, you guys, those are both very important things. And that's why I wanted you to come on. In this day and age, and this is a big question I wanted to push out to both of you. There are real big pushbacks. I don't know if that was good English or not. There's a very big pushback to the type of work that you do. The importance of what you do is being pushed back in my mind. Now, I am only in this when I'm out to do some artistic work for the both of you. But can you guys talk about maybe some of the issues that have come back, especially in the last few years, that you have had to deal with when it comes to anything, presentations, people pushing back on some of the things that you may want to push in your in both of your platforms that you have. Tell me some of those issues that have come up in definitely the past 3 years in terms of DEI. Anyone can start.
I'll let Latoya, since I just ended, if you're okay.
Sure.
And you know, let me say this so you can be safe. Just give us a little bit of, because what you do is not easy. I mean, the love that you're showing right now for it is so important, but it is not an easy job that you have.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the unique piece, and maybe it's just me being naive, but because I've done this work, the unique piece that I've encountered around being in this space is people have so many feelings about everything. So I find myself, which I imagine might be a little different than someone working in a different industry, or even in a different aspect of where I currently am right now. I'm neglected to say I serve as the Executive Director for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Davenport University. Yes. So even my colleagues maybe who work in dining services, or my colleagues who work in facilities or even institutional research, that I spend quite a bit of time being mindful of who I am, how I show up in spaces, the assumptions folks have just about me in any exchange and what they bring to that exchange, and just having to be really mindful of, from emails that I write to, again, presentations I give, to asks for collaborations, that folks seem to be navigating their feelings and emotions about what I find to be many times just misinformation of what this DEI thing is. What is diversity, equity, and inclusion? And having to navigate that all of the time is exhausting. I mean, I was sharing this morning in the meeting before this that you expect it, but it still catches you off guard. And so when I was at a former institution and had a break from doing work, going over to the cafeteria to have lunch, and I sat down, and the white colleague next to me said, "Oh, we're coming up with Black names for each other today." And I thought, well, I guess I don't play this game because I've got my, what do you do with them? Like, I literally just wanted to sit down and eat lunch. And so navigating from our own individual identities and how we might experience microaggressions or just aspects of encountering stereotypes about who we are, but then navigating that, carrying the weight of that for all of the folks, whether it be students and colleagues that you are trying to improve their experience for, and then working on the actual content, right, of what we're teaching, how we're developing programs and services, how we're having an impact in the community. It is, and there's just a lot of, I think, misinformation as we're seeing around buzzwords that folks don't understand and fundamentally refuse to acknowledge the impact that, in this case, in the context of Black history, although Black history is more than just, you know, the struggle we've had on the Freedom Bus, is, you know, all of the beautiful things about what it means, and varied things it means to be Black. But there are some really dark, disgusting, and disturbed experiences that Black folks have had in this country and had done to us in this country. And I think the refusal to acknowledge that and to understand how that legacy still plays out and impacts the outcomes, whether it be financially, health-wise, educationally, just keeps us in a place where we continue to hit these barriers in these conversations, in these actions. And I think you can look through history, right? Every time there's this cycle of advancement for Black folks, there's this wave of pushback,
Yes.
this heightened supremacy, white supremacy, that just overtakes those steps. And I don't think that's different than what we're seeing now. It may look different, right? So folks might not be holding those signs outside of school buildings because they enchanting at Black kids trying to enter. But it's there, that same sentiment, those same opinions, that same culture of anti-Blackness. It's there, and yes, it's exhausting to navigate. But you know, at this point in my career, I'm still willing to fight. Becoming a parent, I think, has given me renewed energy that I will, at least as much as I have control over, do what I can to ensure that my kiddos have more equitable experiences and opportunities than the previous generations.
Right. And I see right now, and this is why I asked this question, is the pushback is very big. I don't know how big it is as much as it is loud. And maybe it is big, but I was telling my husband today about how terms that people have wanted to embrace to help push forward equity and push forward history and push forward understanding I'm calling it flipping the script, you know, terms like wokeness or whatever, you know, the whatever the term is for positiveness, they have flipped the script for it to be kind of ugly. And let's take the libraries right now, not having the opportunity to have books that tell everyone's story is something that happened probably in the 1950s. And we're going back to that way of disenfranchising people and their stories to be able to read about their stories. So I was wondering, you know, how that is affecting your work right now, but it seems like is it worse than it was when you first started, or is it just, like you're saying, there's history to it, so it's basically the same, people are going back to that. Is that how you're feeling?
Related to education, you're asking?
Relating to your DEI in general.
It definitely, I think, over the last few years, since, you know, the election of Obama, has been louder, but it's always been there.
It's always been there.
I think, again, it just shifts maybe what it looks like and how it's presented. But yeah, I mean, the same, at least on an individual level, I see, I've always worked in spaces where there were allies, and I've always worked in spaces where there was a lot of work to do on an individual level.
Yeah.
And I think organizationally as well, I think there have maybe been instances that have given organizations outs to be able to be more performative in how they demonstrate their commitment to DEI.
Mhm.
But on a substantive level, I don't know that it's different.
Yeah.
Because again, I'm still seeing, I mean, I have little kiddos and I'm still seeing worksheets come home from, kindergarten and first grade that this is not how we should be engaging the conversation of Thanksgiving. We're still having the same outdated
Right.
cultural topics, limiting Black History Month to civil rights struggles like that. So in those aspects, it's the same that I grew up with.
Yeah. Yeah. And me as well. And I'm much older. So I understand. I
Not
understand.
much.
No. So Rhae-Ann, in the field of healthcare, do you feel, and you've been in education too, but how are you feeling about the progress that is happening? Or do you feel there's kind of a pushback in either one of the settings that you've been in the past?
Yeah, I think that certainly there has been, continues to be incremental progress, both in education and in healthcare. That said, all it takes is for one incident, and you can go back 3 steps, or you may feel like we're reverting back to decades. So for me, it's always feels like, 3 to 4 steps forward, maybe a couple steps back. And I think that's important for anyone who's interested in working in DEI or committed to DEI. I would love to say that we just, we're blazing trails, only moving forward, but there tends to be that pattern of kind of stepping back. But you have to certainly commit to staying the course and moving forward, knowing that progress can be made. I think in both education and in healthcare and beyond, one of the biggest challenges when it comes to DEI is shifting the paradigm from win, lose to win-win. I think when folks hear those terms, diversity, equity, and inclusion, there's a profile of who they feel is receiving special services or special benefits or goodies. Someone who is getting the advantage over someone else, regardless of the historical injustices. And so how do we shift folks from this win-lose, meaning if we are looking at the data, what's glaring in the data, if we talk about educational outcomes, if we talk about health disparities, it's glaring, the differences in outcomes across groups. Even in the face of that data, folks really struggle with feeling like we are prioritizing meeting the needs of certain groups in order to close the gap. Because they feel by prioritizing the meeting of those needs that somehow they will be left out or left behind, or they're going to have a smaller piece of the pie. So for me, when DEI is done well, when it's most effective, everyone sees themselves as part of DEI, under the umbrella of DEI, meaning across races, ethnicities, across sexual orientation, gender identity, socioeconomic levels, geographic areas, educational backgrounds, etc. Everyone is part of the discussion. Everyone is a beneficiary and everyone is a contributor. So the challenge for us, I believe, as DEI professionals is how do we help everyone see themselves as indeed beneficiaries and contributors while meeting the needs of groups that are being left behind as it is glaring, and I mean glaring, in the data.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I think that kind of brings me to the other, it wasn't a quote, but the whole fact about data is so important. And this was, and I think I sent you guys this, but this is a,
Edye, can I jump in real quick before you
yes,
shift to I think I know where you're going, but I
yeah,
just connect that data piece to what we've been talking about is the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think there is still a fundamental, and again, I'm not trying to keep coming back to education, but I think this fundamental gap and refusal to acknowledge, even if we're presented with the data, why those disparities exist. And we have to shift from it being the health disparities among Black folks related to these conditions or these whatever are because Black folks XYZ, or the graduation rate, retention rate of Black students there's disparate outcomes, academic outcomes compared to white students. Well, it's because Black students fill in the blank, right? We've all heard these individual, don't value education. I've heard it my whole career. The parents don't value education as much. Their poor diet, right? Whatever you're referencing health-wise, or it's this individual, there's something, right, that Black folks, if they would just do it differently, then we wouldn't see these negative outcomes. And we have to fundamentally shift that even in the data, that there are systemic barriers and oppressors that exist that are related, again, to every single industry. So Rand's work within healthcare is impacted by the business community and where they set up shop. The pollutants they put in the air in the certain neighborhoods they intentionally pick over other we're all connected, and we all, every sector, every industry needs to be working on confronting the systemic issues that exist. And so I just needed to name that piece, because when you talk about barriers, shifting folks' mindset outside of, well, if, and in this case, the invitation here and just speaking about Black folks, if they would just do this differently, no ma'am, we need to have deeper and a willingness for, I think, more leaders to engage in that equity piece, being focused at the systems level.
Yeah, and you are absolutely right about that. I just had a conversation with a lady yesterday who used to work in North Carolina, and she was a environmental lawyer. And I can't remember the big company, I think it's Dow, and how all of their pollutants, talking about coal ash and that type of stuff, was actually dumped in an area that was predominantly Black and brown people in that area, and they're building things in that area. And so health-wise, it was, and it still is, affecting even our kids with learning situations. And there's so many things that need to be addressed in that. And as DEI people, it's so deep. It could go on and on and on. And you're just in that area just to really deal with the people that you're working with right now. But the picture is so big. It's so many things. And I hate it when they, blame the people who are in those positions, blame them for the problems that they're having. And that's oppressive within itself. The whole busing thing, Rhae-Ann, I know was, I wasn't bused, but busing happened at the same time that I got to the North End. My parents bought a house and I went to Northeast, as you went to Riverside. I saw that difference. They didn't even prepare these kids to be bused to a different place and have to deal with different people that they weren't accustomed to. And I've got a lot of history on the whole educational aspect of it, but it is, it's very important. And I thank you for those statistics. I was going to get into the statistics of how being diverse and equitable and that type of thing in business is actually beneficial. And how can we get that message across about the beneficial? It's not a win-lose situation. It is a win-win. And this was something, according to McKinsey and Company, which must be a firm that does statistical programming. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are important goals for many business teams, not only to establish an inclusive workplace, but also to make a business as well-rounded and successful as possible. In fact, diverse and inclusive corporations are more likely to outperform their competitors by 36%. So when if you want to look at everything in a business setting, which a lot of these people do, well, how does this benefit us? Well, you bring in these different voices and you're able to really figure out a lot of things that impact the whole company. And is that something that you think is, I mean, the success of what you guys do, what do you think, what is success to you, I guess is what it is. For you individually, for you as a head of the areas that you're in, and for your whole companies, do they embrace this idea of diversity making the businesses more successful?
Yeah, I would say at my organization, certainly we, the leadership, the board of directors embraces our commitment to DEI, so much so that inclusion, and for us, that end goal is inclusion, diversity and equity, and our cultural competency development. All of that is are essential to achieving that end goal of inclusion. And that's named as one of our top 5 values of our organization, inclusion. With it being named as one of the 5 values, then a lot of our work cascades from there, and our even measurement of our work, what we're held accountable, directly aligns with our values. So that being said, as far as this, the success of DEI for me is when, as an organization, that everyone can fully contribute, that everyone is reaching their full potential, that we are identifying and helping to close the gap in outcomes across different groups, including gaps as far as outcomes for our staff and physicians and the patients we serve. Also, for us, if we are really committed to inclusion, and to me, this speaks to something very important that Latoya said. Latoya talked about addressing DEI systemically. And I'm very excited that in healthcare, that we talk a lot when we talk about health equity, that we talk about not only talk about, but work at getting at the root cause of these preventable differences in outcomes. So we are intentional about addressing and partnering with community organizations to address issues like racism, sexism, homophobia, xenophobia, poverty, etc. And someone might say, well, why is a healthcare organization involved with getting at the root causes? Because it's a win-win.
Yes,
I think one of the glaring examples for us would be COVID, where folks might have thought, only community A or group B is being impacted by COVID. No, all of us were being impacted by COVID, and the way that it disproportionately impacted different groups, especially Black and Brown communities. So I'm very excited that we are addressing the root causes. Also, I'm very excited that within healthcare And I had never heard of this terminology I'm going to share prior to working in healthcare. We focus a lot on what we call the social determinants of health. So, you know, we've talked a little bit about busing but the social determinants of health speak to the fact that where you live, work, and play, that it affects your health outcome. So again, it forces us as an organization that's committed to DEI and to health equity to be involved with addressing those root causes, those isms that are affecting where we work, play, where we live, and ultimately affecting our health.
Absolutely. Latoya, you want to add to that?
Yeah, thank you for those comments as well. I was sitting here thinking about, you know, the business case is great. I think, you know, any community that has thriving businesses is one that I want to be a part of. I think my question would be, you know, who owns those businesses? And sure, Davenport, you know, I wouldn't be there if, you know, I didn't think that they were committed to DEI work, if they didn't have some tangible and demonstrated ways in which they were addressing, you know, kind of systemic issues related to education, and a leader, you know, our president is very much committed, and having that, you know, top-down leadership is extremely important. So I think, and we've had some good successes. I want to kind of shift maybe away from my organization, which I know is how you kind of pose the question, and just think bigger than individual businesses, because I want to say back in 2018, the W.K. Kellogg Foundation put out a report, and I know they're not the first, and they hopefully won't be the last, but looked at the business case from kind of a U.S. economy and how many billions the U.S. could, I think it was trillions of dollars that the U.S. economy could be increased by if we would eliminate, and this was specific to race, but racial disparities in healthcare, incarceration, education, employment. There may have been another one. But again, looking at the various sectors of how we live, how we learn, how we work, right? And if we center that, we achieve what Rhae-Ann is talking about, a win-win. If we continue to just worry about what X organization is doing, right, what educational institution is doing, or X healthcare, as individual organizations, we lose out on the big picture. We should care about it. I remember when I was at Aquinas College, I had a colleague, Gary, may he rest in peace. I miss him. He was on fire about Strengths Quest. And I remember taking the Strengths Quest because he won me over, and one of my strengths was connectedness, I think it's called. And someone asked me, like, help me understand what that means. I don't quite understand what that aspect of your strength. I said, well, for me, how it plays out is when I drive, this is being recorded, there are some places you can drive in communities where there are literally fences and planted trees that gate their community in. Yes. And that's always been a lost concept on me, because for me, the graduation rate for Detroit public school students should matter to us in Grand Rapids. Having a pathway for underdocumented and DACA youth in this country to be able to choose a career and be a productive citizen should matter to all of us. We are all connected. Yes. Now, I might have some passion areas based on who I am and the identities that I bring to this world that I'm maybe going to be more passionate about fighting for. But I care about all. And I think we need business communities that, and we have some very strong examples of understanding it's got to be bigger than what you do in your individual business. And that in order to have enough employees going forward, you have to diversify who you recruit. We are so far beyond that. but that's a reflection of a business leader I had a conversation with, who said their tie to this DEI thing was realizing they could no longer compete in their organization with the companies that were recruiting talent from India. That's why they had to get on board with the DEI piece. And I just thought, we have some work
We
to
have
do
some work,
to
right?
see ourselves connected in a way that, again, those disparities, whether they be across racial lines, which this specific report was calling out, regarding those aspects of our community, they have to matter beyond just how profitable or how much we save in what we lose through retention when our climate doesn't keep people as an individual business.
Right, right. That is an amazing point. And I think I want to find that article because it really is, the whole thing about cutting taxes and all this stuff and, meeting our, debt, our American debt or whatever it is, just to know that you could save so much money by doing these things, bringing people together and getting them out of poverty and getting them out of whatever situation that they're in that kind of drains them and drains the system. Thank you for
there's
sharing
something unsettling, or at least should be unsettling, for areas of West Michigan to be named the best place to live, to make these lists of, right, aspiring to be the best place to raise a family, while at the exact same time being named the worst place to live and raise a family as Black folks. There has to be something, and again, that connectedness piece for me cringes when we celebrate those aspects of our community while at the same time, literally sometimes down the same daggone street, the reality is so drastically different. We need to be at like emergent level response to that dichotomy.
Absolutely. And there's a lot to think about there. And how do you, right now we're putting our little pieces. I want to talk about, how the arts in general kind of looks like that too, to a certain extent. Me being in the arts and realizing that a lot of people don't have a voice in expression of their history, expression of who they are. And one of the easiest places to do it is in an art form, but we have not built that with our educational program at all in junior high and high school and that type of thing. And so where I and Ebony Road Players comes from is trying to, and it's our small way, is trying to have these conversations in this small format. Maybe someone should write a total play about how the inequities can happen in a really well-off city. If I can say that, West Michigan is really well off, and to have these inequities in education, in the arts, in business, in whatever, is a little ridiculous. And I want to kind of switch over to because it's almost an hour, and I said 40 minutes, but I'm going to have you guys on again because this is so deep. There's so much in this that I hope you'll come and join me again and we can be a little more specific. I wanted everyone to know who you are. I wanted everyone to know about how strong DEI and important DEI is. And my thing for you, for Rhae-Ann and for Latoya, both of you in your different areas, have had us come and help you with just certain conversations. And I want to tell you how I appreciate that, how Ebony Road appreciates that, because we are always trying to figure out how can we help in these discussions and how can we help further the conversations along. And I hope that we have been a help to you on certain issues, but would love to be able to stay in contact and help in whatever way we can as an arts organization. I started off this theater company by being something fun. Yeah, let's have some fun. Let's do some Black stories and blah, 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 blah. And then it's all turned into this social justice, history, helping organizations like yours to have a talk that's not, you know, I don't know, hit you in the face. You can sit back and just really listen to a particular story and have a conversation around that. And I hope that's been helpful to you all.
Absolutely. I'd say maybe it doesn't hit you in the face, but it definitely hits you in the heart. I mean, Ann and Emmett, we brought last year, thanks to y'all, and the response from that, right, was just, again, making these connections between different lived experiences and increasing just the ways in which we see the humanity and have opportunity to see the humanity even in a Black experience, if that might be different from ours, or as you also have done, to connect the Black experience with others in a performance. And so I think I love the arts. I randomly ended up in like a side role on the Velveteen Rabbit in 7th grade at the Civic Theater, and had an amazing vocal music teacher, Miss Carrie Hooksman, in high school. I went to East Kentwood. So, and she's still there doing her thing. I've always loved the arts, and so I might be biased in that sense, but I think it just creates this space for us to, regardless of title, right? Whether you're the president of the organization watching this, regardless of role within an organization or where you're situated in society, the arts provide space to engage in storytelling. And we know, even in various cultures, how powerful storytelling is to understanding tradition, but also understanding aspects of what we've talked about today, whether that be injustice or the power of culture, the power of understanding others. And so I'm grateful for the continued partnerships we've had with Ebony Role Players. Look forward to having another show March 9th, 6 p.m. at Davenport Letting a Campus. If folks are interested, partnering with y'all and Grahai to bring Don't Mind Me to open up hopefully a meaningful conversation about mental health and the importance of mental health within the Black community and within other communities as well. So as long as you'll allow me, I'm a willing and active participant in your programming, but collaborator.
Thank you so much. And I think we're out there just to help you do whatever you are doing. And Rhae-Ann, I know I've worked with you. Let's see, what did we do?
Don't Mind Me. It has to be at least, I want to say 2 to 3. Malcolm Martin.
Yep, the meeting.
Fictitious meeting. I'm blanking on. So
you came to see
at least 3 or more.
Yeah, you came to see Sheepdog, right?
Yeah. We came from the since I've been at University of Michigan Health West. Yes, we supported, which was absolutely excellent. Absolutely excellent. I actually would echo what Latoya has shared. When at colleges and universities, and now at the hospital, Ebony Role Players and what you're doing, it's amazing and it's needed in the DEI field. So when folks think about learning, and for me, learning cultural competency development is critical to DEI. You hear a lot in the DEI space, or even in our world in general, you hear language like representation matters. And a lot of times within our organizations, that's where it starts and ends. It's like, okay, let's hire some people of color. Let's hire some folks of different sexual orientation and gender identity. And if we don't take anything else from the recent Tyree Nichols beating and killing and murder, I hope one takeaway will be that it's much more than representation.
Yes.
So the fact that you have 5 Black officers who beat and killed this Black man, and the difference, a lot of us are pushing for that increased diversity within our organizations. Yes, that's one part of it, but that cultural competency piece is critical. That piece of how do we work effectively across differences? How do we come to value differences? You started this our podcast today with the statement from your friend or colleague. How do we embrace, not tolerate differences? So for me, Ebony, role players, what you're doing is essential. When people think about DEI and how to increase their learning and their cultural competencies, I think one of the first responses is, okay, I can't learn everything about every group that's out there, so I'm not going to try to learn it all. A second common response is that, okay, if I participate in DEI learning opportunities, it's going to be presented in a way where someone's the victim and someone's the oppressor. And maybe I don't want to participate in training where I feel like I'm always leaving the session feeling like I've been victimized, or I don't want to leave the session always feeling like, okay, I'm to blame, I'm the oppressor. What I find with Ebony role players in your production, it's a safe way and safe space and creative way for folks to engage with what are very sensitive topics. I also find with the DEI cultural competency learning efforts that in some settings, and again, I find it in education and in healthcare, that folks, they want emotion to be removed from it. And for me, when cultural competency is developed well, it's a matter of both the heart and the mind. And to me, that's what the role player does well. You're educating us and you're moving us. You know, while watching those productions, we're able to see ourselves in those productions, in those characters, and to think about our own lived experiences, and then to apply it not only during that performance, but to take it outside of that setting and apply it to our everyday lives. So I'm so excited what Ebony Role Players is doing. I hope that it can be replicated through other performing arts groups, other forms of art as well. And again, for me, it's needed and it's essential. It's helping to meet a very important need.
Thank you. Thank you. And that's how we found ourselves. And I love every second of it when I'm looking for performances to do, just to be able to help you guys further conversations. I appreciate that very, very much. I'm kind of new at all this producing stuff. I'm mainly a performer, but I find that to be really helpful and fun for me to figure out a way to assist in what you guys are doing. And what I think a lot of people in the city are doing is how do we come together? And I think through the arts is a great way for us to do it. I am going to, you guys have been wonderful. Normally, like I said, this takes like 20 minutes, 40 minutes, but this was deep. So I knew it was going to be a little bit longer. Latoya, do you have anything to add before we say adieu to both of you?
Just thank you again to you for the invitation. Rhae-Ann, it's always great to see you. It's been too long, but love to you both, and let's keep at it.
Thank you so much. And I feel like having a DEI party and just invite all my DEI people together and just have one big, I think one of you came to my birth. Did you come to my
We both did.
party?
Yeah,
You
we were
both
both
did.
there.
I'm like, I want to do
Yeah.
another one. I had so much fun with that.
I'll be
So,
there.
Yes.
Yes, it was fun.
So look forward to that, my dears. All right. Thank you all so much. I appreciate you. And I hope that you have a wonderful day. And Latoya will be in touch. If we need to do any more about the prep of the show that we are doing at Davenport on March 9th, we'll make sure we get that all out there. And Rhae-Ann, I'll be in touch with you.
Thank you.
All righty.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the Ebony Road Players podcast. Creating theater with a purpose is our mission, and that is not possible without people like you. We appreciate you joining us for this podcast and for being a part of our diverse community. To view the video version of this episode and gain access to exclusive Ebony Road Players content and perks, join our community on Patreon at patreon.com/Ebony Road Players. In the words of Zora Neale Hurston, quote, "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you," unquote. If you have a story to share, we'd love to hear from you. Contact us on Facebook, Instagram, or our website, ebonyroad.org. And we look forward to continuing the conversation next time on the Ebony Road Players podcast.